Aronian and pretty much any other human would expect the move bishop takes d4 here, but instead Vishy played another fantastic follow-up, and here he went knight d to e5. Hey there! In today's video we're going to see the most amazing game played by former world champion and legendary player Viswanathan Anand, also known as Vishy. He himself considers this game one of his best games, if not his best game.
It's probably my best game.
And some of the ideas that we're going to learn here are the risk of moving a piece twice in the opening, some very advanced tactical ideas, and typical checkmate patterns against a castle king. So let's get started with the game. Vishy is playing as black, that's why I'm taking the game from his side. After d4, d5, c4, c6, we get a slab defense, and after knight to f3, knight to f6, and knight to c3, black went e6. We have many possible options here. White can play the move bishop to g5, but e3 is also very popular, as Aronian played in this position. And after knight b to d7, bishop to d3, black went for d takes e4. It was also possible to keep the pawn on d5 and play a developing move like bishop to d6, but here after taking on c4, we attack the bishop, and after bishop takes, black's idea is to follow up with the move b5. And after bishop to d3, here Vishy went for bishop to d6. Just want to mention that another main alternative here is the move a6, planning to go for a quick c5. But bishop to d6 also makes a lot of sense, developing, and after white castles, black castled, Aronian went queen to c2, and here Vishy went for bishop to b7. So in this structure, the bishop is going to develop to b7. Ideally, black would like to activate the bishop with the move c5. This is one of the main ideas that black has in the position to fight for the center and also activate his pieces. Here Aronian went a3, preventing some before ideas, and before might also be an idea. Vishy went rook to c8, and in this complicated position, Aronian went for the move knight to g5. So white had other options like going rook to d1. This anticipates some c5 or e5 ideas and tries to create some pressure along the d file, or even the move b4 was an idea, trying to fight against c5 ideas by black. But Aronian is a very ambitious player. Thanks to him, we're gonna get this masterpiece, because if he had played more solidly, we might not get such an exciting game. So here he went for knight to g5, which is a move that is ambitious but is also a bit risky, because white still has to develop his pieces, for example the bishop on c1, and instead white is going for attacking ideas. There's an idea to put pressure on h7, and black even has a few tactical ideas like taking on h2. This is a typical tactical idea, and after king takes knight to g4, we give a check and we get a discover attack against the knight. But here Aronian's idea was to get very good compensation after queen takes and f3. So white has very nice central pawns, the bishop pair, so now the knight has to go back, so white has very good compensation here. Taking on e3 here is not an option, because after a move like queen to f2, white is winning the piece since the knight on e3 is pinned. So knight to g5 also has some positional ideas. It is not just about attacking on h7. And in this position playing the move h6, since white's idea is to capture on h7, here Aronian's idea was to go knight g to e4, and this knight is gonna be better placed on e4, fighting against c5 by black. For example, here after knight takes and knight takes, white is attacking the bishop, fighting against c5, so white has a very comfortable position here. But instead Vishy started playing very nice aggressive chess. He doesn't care about material. First he went c5, this is the main idea for black in the position. It activates the bishop and it will also activate the rook after black takes on d4. On the other hand, now black has two pawns that can be taken. So here Aronian took the pawn on h7. If he had taken on b5, for example with the bishop, now black can take on d4, and after a move like h6, now there's pressure on the c file, so knight g to e4 is not possible. The knight on c3 is pinned, and after a move like knight to f3, bishop takes and pawn takes. Here black has great compensation for the pawn. White's king might become exposed. These pawns on the f file are quite weak. So this is at the very least a very easy position for black to play. So Aronian captured on h7, and now Vishy offered more material. The knight is attacking the rook on f8, but Vishy doesn't care about that. He went knight to g4, eyeing the pawn h2, and we can see how black's pieces are eyeing the king side. The queen might join the party with a move like queen to h4. So this position is at the very least very hard for white to play. Here Aronian went f4. Let's evaluate some alternatives. A move like h3 might make some sense, trying to attack this invader. But here after the move bishop to h2, king to h1, queen to h4 is actually very strong. There's an idea to take the pawn h3 because the pawn on g2 is pinned. Although here white could try to hold the move bishop to e4, which is at the very least very scary to play in a game. Black's pieces look very threatening. But the main point is that after taking the knight, blacks give a very typical checkmate after the bishop moves king to g1 and queen to h2. So h3 was a scary option that might be playable, but f4 is still fairly reasonable. On the other hand, taking the rook is just way too greedy. Black simply takes on h2, and after queen to h4, we're gonna get a very quick checkmate. So Aronian played the move f4, planning to close the bishop that was eyeing the king side, and here Vishy took on d4, and after e takes d4, here Aronian was probably waiting for a quiet move like rook to e8, or maybe even queen to b6, trying to put pressure on d4, but here Vishy played two of the most amazing moves that I've ever seen. First, he started with the move bishop to c5, attacking the pawn on d4, but the main idea is to clear the way for the queen to capture on d4. In this very complicated position, Levon made a decisive mistake and he went bishop to e2. Let's try to understand what goes on here. So taking on c5 looks like the reasonable option, and the idea is that after knight takes, black is attacking the bishop and also planning to go queen to d4. The bishop doesn't really have good squares. For example, after bishop to e2, we get queen to d4, and after king to h1, knight to f2 is very strong here, actually winning. Black is going to give a checkmate. If king to g1, we get a double check, and after king to h1, we get a smothered checkmate. Rook takes is forced, and knight to f2 leads to a very nice checkmate. Or if white tries to give material, this is normally a very common defensive idea, but after queen takes, white cannot stop checkmate. There's an idea to give a background checkmate with queen to e1 or to take on g2, so there's nothing that white can do about it. So after bishop to c5, taken on c5, and knight takes c5, this looks very scary, but here white had the very cold-blooded knight takes f8, which is very hard to play in a game, because when you normally get this greedy, you end up getting checkmated, but white seems to have chances to hold here. For example, after knight takes d3, h3, and queen to d4, after king to h1, black can get the material back. For example, after giving a check on f2, white gives some material back, and after knight takes and king to h2, black can definitely take the material back, and black is still pressing because white still has to develop the pieces on the queen side, but at least black doesn't have a clear checkmate in this position. And that was a better try, because after bishop to c5 and bishop to e2, Aronian and pretty much any other human would expect the move bishop takes d4 here, but instead Vishy played another fantastic follow-up, and here he went knight d to e5. Again, the main idea is to clear the way for the queen. The knight on d5 also protects the knight on g4, and amazingly this position is just desperate for white. So here Aronian took on g4. Let's evaluate some other alternatives, like taking the knight. After f takes e5, we get another very pretty smothered checkmate. Queen takes d4, king to g1. We saw some drawbacks with the move bishop to e2, that the queen doesn't cover the f2 square. So here black has the brilliant queen to g1, and after rook takes and knight to f2, we get another smothered checkmate. If white takes on c5, after queen to d4, king to f1, we saw a similar idea in another position. Knight to f2 is just deadly, because after rook takes and queen takes, this double threat of queen takes g2 and queen to e1, given a checkmate, wins the game. So Aronian took on g4. In any case, the position is just desperate. Bishop takes. Here it was possible to take with the queen, but bishop takes e4 is also very strong. And after king to h1 and knight takes g4, Vishy is just planning to continue the attack with the move queen to h4. Here Aronian took on f8, and before playing queen to h4, because white has ideas to go queen to h7, Vishy played another very brilliant move, f5, just preventing any queen to h7 ideas. He doesn't care about giving the rook on f8 as long as he manages to go queen to h4. Aronian tried knight to g6, covering the h4 square, but after queen to f6, the knight is being attacked. Aronian tried h3, Vishy took the knight, having another very common checkmate pattern in mind. Taking the knight is not possible here because after queen to h6, we get another checkmate. Aronian went queen to e2, and after queen to h5, there's this huge threat of taking the pawn h3 because the pawn on g2 is pinned. So Aronian tried to cover h3 with the queen, and to finish a brilliant game, Anand played another very pretty move, bishop to e3, just interfering with that defense, and in this position Aronian resigned. White is going to lose material or get checkmated. If white takes on e3, we get a checkmate after queen takes and queen takes g2. White can try giving the queen, but after knight takes, we still get all the attack going because white is no time to take the knight because queen takes is still a threat. So hope that you enjoyed this amazing game where we saw a lot of tactical ideas and checkmate patterns. If you want to know how to get better at tactics and other areas of the game, I have a free course that will help you with that, so you might want to check it in the description. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.